Lucia. Yay. Okay, let's see here. Gotta bring that open. Hi, Lucia.
Hi, Tommy.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me? No.
I do. I hear you just fine.
Did you unmute? I was muted.
I unmuted you.
Oh, you can unmute me?
Yeah.
Huh. Where did you go?
One main person.
You can change that format yourself. Up at the top right of the screen is a couple of boxes. If you scroll onto the screen, you'll see one that looks like a bunch of boxes, and then one that looks like a few boxes at the top, and then one big box. So toggle those and see if they help.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thankfully, I'm starting to get more and more familiar with it myself, so that's helpful. All right, so I want this out of the way. We're 24 strong.
Hi, Tommy. I just to let everybody know I forwarded the notes to everybody.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, dear. You're the greatest.
You're welcome.
All right, so I sent the notes out to everyone during lunch. And so if anybody didn't get it, you can just email me directly so I can send it to you. And if you don't have it and there's any communication error, Christine also has the notes, so that should work out great. As other people come in, I'd like to just open the floor up for, what kind of questions came up for you while you were eating lunch and contemplating all that information that just got dumped into your laps? Because it's definitely a lot of information.
I took all my vegetable oil out of my cabinets.
Good job. Yeah. So what we do is we use coconut oil to just line our pans when we're going to cook. And then just a little, like a tablespoon's worth of coconut oil. And then after that, we just add water. To whatever we're cooking, we add water, add water, add water. And then at the end, when we're about to eat, then we add our fresh olive oil or sesame oil or whatever. And that way, the omega-3s aren't being damaged by heat.
Okay, and avocado oil is fine and everything too. It's not like grapeseed, another form of canola.
No, avocado is great. Just any of the oils, you just don't want to heat them.
Yeah.
Right, and you want to make sure that you always buy first extra virgin, first cold pressed extra virgin organic, no matter what kind of oil you buy, right? You'll always want to make sure it's cold pressed because heat pressing damages the oil.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions. Anybody else? Feel free to jump in. Question or comment related to leaky gut, liver, glyphosate, heavy metals. Let's see. We got 25 people. We're just almost there. Anybody else with questions or comments?
So I have a question, Tommy.
Sure.
And I just want to be sure that I'm understanding some of this correctly. So with glycine, is glycine considered a chelate? I'm unfamiliar with some of the terminology.
No, it's not, but it specifically displaces the glyphosate or blocks the glyphosate from being able to become part of our protein amino acid chain.
Okay. And if
So-
we take glycine, should we be taking a binder as well?
It's not a bad idea. Anytime you're going to move or mobilize anything that's toxic, so anytime you cleanse, anytime you take chlorella or ALA, alpha lipoic acid, or any of the chelators like EDTA or DMSO or DMSA, any of those things, you always make sure you take those extra binders.
Okay.
And I sent you guys a binders paper, and that tells you exactly the timing and how to take those.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Anybody else, feel free to jump in. Let's see. Yes, glycine is an amino acid, part of the amino acid chain. And it's actually a very important part of the building blocks of every cell in our body.
Well, I have a question.
Mhm.
So you had said the glyphosate mimics glycine and pushes that out. But then if we're adding glycine in, then that is pushing the glyphosate out. Is that correct?
Yes, if you bring in enough
Then it kind
glycine.
of overwhelms the glyphosate.
Right. Great. And then, let's see, there's another chat there. Who's chatting? Let's see.
Do you have any recommendations for people who do not have gallbladders anymore?
Yeah, it's a tough one. If you don't have a gallbladder, you want to make sure you're doing some kind of alkalizing techniques. Remembering without a gallbladder, the bile is not metered properly.
Right.
So eating a more alkaline diet is actually really important and very helpful. And not eating a cold diet, not eating a raw diet, just eating a more alkaline diet. So those can be confused. But also, bitters are extremely important because you want to make sure that your liver is creating bile virtually all of the time. And that the bile is going into the intestines, alkalizing the intestines. A lot of my folks without gallbladders, I'll have them do the alkalizing techniques of baking soda in warm water at night when they go to bed, and 3 times a day, minimum of an hour before or 2 hours after a meal. And everyone can do that, but it's a great alkalizing technique. The other alkalizing technique is warm lemon water in the mornings or lime juice water in the mornings. Those are alkalizing techniques. Another alkalizing technique is a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, organic apple cider vinegar in 8 ounces of water. All 3 of those techniques neutralize stomach acid.
Thank you. How much baking soda?
It's a teaspoon to 8 ounces of warm water.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I have a paper on that if you guys want it, somebody email me and I'll send it out. Let's see, I think we're 26 people. I think that's.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, so any other questions, comments about the liver talk? Did that feel okay for you guys? Anybody feel overwhelmed by it?
A little bit.
Yeah, it can be a little scary to learn all of these things around how our body becomes toxic over time. But
Scary.
also, it's very empowering because there's so much that we can do to counteract it. And we have to. So somebody asked a question earlier, should we all be doing glyphosate detoxification? Absolutely. It's a major player in cancer. It's a major player in all modern diseases, Parkinson's, all the brain degenerative diseases, the glyphosate's right there. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, ALS, major players. So know that wherever we store heavy metals, we dramatically suppress our immune system. Wherever those metals live, we have no immunity. So we need to get those metals out and get that glyphosate out. Okay. Anybody else? Anything else? All right, so unless there's other questions, Madeline, you want to jump in?
Sure. Okay, so
I just want to remind you, Madeline, to bring your voice closer to your
oh
mic.
yes, oh yes, exactly, exactly. There we go. Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a large, as we all know, a very large topic, and when we talk about community, this is in a way a community effort that a lot of herbalists have been weighing in, have been offering free, talks on how to approach the coronavirus or COVID-19, and through herbs, through medicinal plants. And Tommy and I are going to alternate and do some talking about it. And I can say what I am sharing is, really about my own experience, my understanding of herbs and viruses, and the understanding of a lot of other herbalists, because I feel like it's so important to get insights wherever possible from people we respect. So right now I can say that I've learned a lot from Matthew Wood and Phyllis Light, as I've learned in the past, and that they have a really interesting talk on Matthew Wood's Facebook page. And it's about 2.5 hours. I think you can get a recording of it. So that's another resource. I've certainly learned a lot from Stephen Howard Buhner, as always, and Tommy sent me some of his information that we can pass along to people as well. And his book, Herbal Antivirals, is amazing and wonderful. And if you'd like some really intense information about how to approach viruses, very scientifically based, but humane, I'd definitely recommend that book. I think
Madeline,
yes.
Can you spell his last name, Stephen's last name?
Sure. Buhn, N as in no, or Nancy, ER, Buhner.
Thank you.
Herbal Antivirals. And certainly Donald Yance has weighed in on his blog a little bit. Interesting material, it always is. And I also want to mention Natalie de Normandy, who basically has a wonderful synthesis of much material that's out there. And we can also pass that along to people. Excellent, excellent kind of summary of all of the different ways to approach this virus alternatively. I also want to mention, I think Patty isn't able to join us right now, but she shared a really interesting and I think important antiviral formula that she's been using with success for several years. So there's that as well. So repeat some of what I said earlier. We're learning about the structure of COVID-19, or I'm going to interchangeably say COVID-19 and coronavirus. And we understand in general how viruses enter a cell and how they replicate, how they spread. And actually, there's been some research done on a couple of plants, which basically reveal that some of these plants that we've known as antivirals block the virus from entering the cell, inhibit replication of the virus, and inhibit spreading of the virus. And I have to think, and I'm sure many people would assume that many of the other antiviral herbs that have not been, researched have some of these same actions, or else they wouldn't have been used for such a long time. So, so I think that's kind of oh yeah, and we will talk about the stages of the disease and start out with protection. But of course, as I think I indicated, there's very little research done, and no research done on this actual virus, the COVID-19 virus. But as folk herbalists, as traditional herbalists, we can always rely on our knowledge of the energies of plants, attune the energies to people, look at the underlying imbalances, and support the body's own vital force. So these are basically herbal insights, as someone else mentioned. We'll be focusing a great deal, but not exclusively, on local plants, because my thinking is if we can't order plants, and right now so many herbal companies are not able to supply plants because they've just been overwhelmed by the need out there. What could we rely on in our own environment? What could we harvest? What could we make into medicine? So we'll be talking about some of that. And of course, some of these, and that's the way traditional herbalists have always functioned, to go outside and gather the plants, and some of them are already up, and some of them will be up very soon. It's important, I think it's really important to make herbal medicine this summer, since, we don't know really what the course of this disease will be, but some predictions suggest that there will be several spikes to this epidemic, and we need to be prepared for next fall and winter, particularly late fall. So I think we can not only help ourselves, but we can help our community by being mindful of the plants that are important to harvest and to make into teas and tinctures. So what do we know? And some of you may have heard some of this. We hear from China that the coronavirus causes a damp, cold condition at the deeper levels of the body. And what this means is there's a mucus buildup, and mucus indicates dampness in the lungs, and leading to a stagnant condition. There's always stagnation when you have the buildup of mucus or buildup of fluid. And there's a lack of circulation. There's insufficient blood flow to the lungs. Without the nourishment and warmth from sufficient blood flow, the lungs become cold and more contracted and less able to take in oxygen. If the condition worsens, the lungs can actually become filled with fluid, and ultimately the heart becomes strained. And we don't hear a lot from the medical system about how, the medical system really has left us pretty much on our own. But the heart, the liver, the kidneys are all impacted, and we have to work with these organs and prepare now, but also particularly in the later stages, these organs are highly stressed and we need to know how to work with them. But of course, and Tommy and I were talking about this, on the surface, there's a fever. So there's heat on the surface. And that fever is an immune response to combat the virus, because heat basically can deactivate at least some of the viruses. And we've talked about this before, it's important not to reduce a fever right away, because the fever is basically our ally. The recommendations, which seem pretty high to me, is that don't reduce a fever until it's 103 or over 103. Now, the medical system has been suggesting that people use Tylenol to reduce a fever. And I think this is a really important point here. And Tylenol, does reduce fevers, but it does a number of other things as well. Now, what I originally knew was that Tylenol actually can damage, liver tissue. It's damaging to the tissues of the liver. But I also heard from Natalie de Normandy, who I mentioned earlier, that there's been some research on Tylenol, and I'll kind of read it to you, indicating that, well, let's see, the research was in 1975, 1990, and 2000, that Tylenol may have reduced the symptoms of a cold, of the virus, but caused a highly significant increase in virus production. And the authors state that such treatment could worsen viral illness and contribute to its spread, which is what's going on. In 1990, researchers found that Tylenol, or acetaminophen, suppressed antibody response to the virus and prolonged the time that infected cells produced new virus cells. And in 2000, researchers on acetaminophen found that there was a striking prolongation of a particular flu in patients who took acetaminophen. So important not to do this. I'll just mention something that I heard recently from a friend who said that actually a friend's son who lives on the Cape tested positive for the coronavirus and was concerned and went to a local hospital. He has an underlying asthmatic condition, so they didn't admit him, but they sent him home with steroids. Now, steroids, as we know, will reduce inflammation, but steroids will lower the immune response. And that is not what you want when you're dealing with a serious virus, or any virus, but particularly one like COVID-19. So I think we really always have to be careful about medications that we take with or without a major pandemic going on. I'm going to mention something that just struck my, I thought important to sort of look at, and that is previous experiences of doing medications during a serious viral outbreak. And I had read about this earlier, but I just recently kind of checked in about it. And during the great pandemic of 1918, a number of doctors prescribed aspirin. Now, aspirin had only recently been synthesized, and they didn't know a whole lot about it. So they prescribed really high levels, high amounts of aspirin, and much higher than what doctors would prescribe today. And what they found is that there were a number of early deaths from this particular virus. And even at the time, some doctors noticed that the damage to the lungs in these people with early deaths did not correlate with the viral load, which was much lower. And so they began to be suspicious. And there was actually a paper written, let's see, it was about 10 years ago, by a medical doctor who is a authority on aspirin use. And what she said is that high doses of aspirin and the high doses that were used at the time produced symptoms that could have been difficult to distinguish from those of the flu among those who died soon after they became ill. So we see there's definitely a history of problematic medication, shall we say.
Melanie, can I add about the aspirin?
What?
Can I add something about the aspirin?
Oh, of course. Please jump in whenever it makes sense.
The one thing I want to be clear about is that the aspirin is a blood thinner. And when you have all the cytokine storm in the lungs of inflammation and you thin the blood, the lungs fill up with blood and fluids and the person dies very quickly.
Thank you, Tommy. Yes, yes, that is another very important point. And what they found in the 1918 pandemic is that is really how people died. With there was hemorrhaging. What they're finding right now in some of the early autopsies is that there's microbleeding. So there is some bleeding, maybe not as much, but there's certainly, we certainly don't want to thin the blood to exacerbate that.
It's Christine. The other thing that happened in 1918 is that's when Bayer aspirin came off patent. So a lot of people took it and they actually died of aspirin poisoning.
Thank you. Thank you. That's.
The French are actually recommending not to take ibuprofen.
I was just going to ask if she could talk about the NSAIDs too.
Yeah, that's a big question. And here's what I've learned. There's some question about the NSAIDs increasing the number of ACE2 receptors. And I'll be getting to that. But ACE2 receptors are the pathway that COVID-19 enters the cell rather, not the body. So the concern is that NSAIDs may increase the ACE2 receptor numbers on the cell, but there's another body of thought that suggests that it takes a while for this to happen. And it's not likely that the NSAIDs will be able to generate, will be able to cause that number of, or a large increase in the ACE2 receptors. However, they're a very bad idea anyway, because ACE2 receptors cause lesions in the stomach and the intestines. And then that makes me wonder if they cause lesions in the lungs, So I don't know. That's a question.
And I have to put in here, that's another place where the glyphosate needs to be investigated, because the glyphosate is ending up becoming all of our tissues.
Right.
And it's playing a role in this.
That could very well be, yes, yeah. So, all right. So, so if you're running a fever, as herbalists, we know there's a very tried and true fever formula that we all know about: elder, yarrow, any of the mints, peppermint, spearmint, and of course you can always throw in a little bone set, because these are all powerfully diaphoretic plants, and they definitely help bring down a fever if you're feeling that your fever is so high that it needs to be brought down. Cool compresses, of course, can help. Now, here's some more information from Natalie Normandy, and she mentions that the old rule of thumb, and this comes from the 1918 pandemic, is to rest as many days as you had a fever. A John Hopkins study of the 1918 flu observed that of all the therapies used, those who went to bed earliest and stayed there the longest and had the best nursing care were the most likely to survive. And that's, it makes you wonder about the people who leap out of the bed and then start taking, some medication to basically disguise whatever symptoms they have left. What happens around that. And, there are a lot of chronic diseases that may develop around people weakening their system by not giving sufficient time for recuperation. So once again, let's go back to our roots and, and assess. We'll look at the symptom picture, assess internal balances. This may be a reminder of what we all know, but we all look, as traditional herbalists, we look at energy. The very simple concepts: hot, cold, damp, dry. The law of opposites, basically cooling down heated conditions, warming what is cold, drying what is damp, moistening what is dry. And, Tommy, you and I were just talking about 19th century Thomsonian herbalism, very simple, but also a very powerful form of healing, where you basically you warm the core, and that's what we're going to be doing in relation to this particular virus, warming the core, because at the core is a cold, damp condition, and then opening all the channels of elimination, which Tommy was talking about in relation to the liver. But we always have to keep all the channels of elimination open. So, the diaphoretics, for the lungs, for the skin, gentle laxatives, keep the bowels open, diuretics, the kidneys. And it's interesting, one thing I've observed among many is that, a number of plants that are considered invasive, I just think of them as abundant, but considered invasive, are really helpful for serious viruses and are helpful for the body in general. And, of the simple laxatives, never overlook prune juice, but there's yellow dock, buckthorn. And buckthorn is a major invasive. And look how, effective it is as a laxative. And Tommy mentioned Cascara sagrada, certainly. So as I mentioned, for damp, cold condition, we need warming herbs, such as ginger. Now, ginger, interestingly enough, is not considered an antiviral, but it has antiviral actions by raising the body temperature and flushing out toxins. So if you don't have ginger or have difficulty buying it, it's usually pretty easy, but if you don't, buy ginger brandy at a liquor store, It's really interesting. I have to think about it, which, the liquor stores, as we know, are essential services, considered that way by the governor and probably by many states. When I raise my voice, sometimes I cough, so I will have to drink water. And while you're at it, actually, you can buy some Benedictine, a liqueur which includes a number of herbs, including angelica. And we're going to be looking at the warming antivirals. And certainly that includes angelica. It's a stimulating expectorant and diaphoretic, and definitely one of our allies when we want to, basically select herbs that will be antiviral and warming. Cayenne has antiviral action, and garlic, another strong antiviral. I'll be talking about garlic and onions. And although I've heard some conflicting things about onions, but I think red onions are the best. That usually go with color. Onions and garlic both are rich sources of organosulfur compounds like quercetin and allicin, which are both associated with inhibition of viral infection. So, just make your food. As I say, food is medicine. Garlic, chop up garlic, chop up onions, and you can, as Tommy was saying, you just put a little bit of some form of really healthy oil and then start sauteing at on a low flame, and then put in water and turn it up and, start steaming.
Can I just add, if you're making broth, if you include the skins of the onion and the garlic?
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, the skins are rich in quercetin. Thank you. Yeah, good idea. And turmeric. Now, turmeric, it's interesting. What I hear, it's both warming and cooling. It's sort of an interesting herb. And it also has been shown to inhibit replication of certain viruses, and it inhibits virus cell binding. And I'll be talking about that in a moment. And these are herbs that are basic and they're generally accessible. So we can do a lot right now just with kitchen herbs, oregano, thyme, powerfully antiviral. You can make a steam if you just don't have anything. You can make a steam of these herbs. And, I know Linda has always talked, and rightly so, about the virtues of steaming. So you don't even need essential oils. Now, other warming antivirals are some of them are less accessible, but I think it's important we mention them because we're going to be in this for a little while, and we may be able to be able to order them. The other ones are one of my personal favorites, lomatium, which grows out in the west, as does osha. They're both warming antivirals. And what else? And of course, angelica. And you know, Tommy, you and I were just talking about black-eyed Susan, and it's so important to remember black-eyed Susan. I'll be saying a little bit more about it, but one reason I'm mentioning it is black-eyed Susan, which is a coneflower, has this, you know, has the same kinds of actions as echinacea, only it is warming, which makes a lot of sense when you look at that, you know, bright yellow, those bright yellow petals. So, you know, it's a very underutilized herb, and it grows, you know, I mean, some years it grows more abundantly than others. And my hope is that it will grow abundantly this year. But, you know, go out and dig up the root, ask permission and dig up the root, and you can make some wonderful medicine for the fall. So we also need herbs that thin and clear the mucus. And that's because there's a tendency for the mucus to harden as the infection continues. And which makes it very difficult, not impossible, to expectorate and get the mucus out of the system. So relaxing expectorants, we'll go over them again, but really important. There are a lot of them. Mullein, one of the great lung tonics. You can never go wrong with mullein and elecampane, both of them. But mullein is one, wild cherry, marshmallow, fenugreek. Now, fenugreek, it's interesting. I've never done a huge amount with fenugreek, but I will now. I've been hearing a lot about fenugreek from Matthew Wood and Phyllis Light. And it's nice because it's not only thin the mucus, but it's somewhat warming as well, because so many of these herbs are cooling. It's indigenous to Southern Europe and Southwest Asia, but it's, you know, it's generally accessible around here. Along with that, lobelia, also one of the great lung herbs, you know, relaxes the bronchioles, relaxes, well, the whole respiratory system, really. Aniseed, skunk cabbage. I'm also very fond of skunk cabbage. Pleurisy root. And then the two herbs that contain pyrrolizine alkaloids, but I think they're so important, comfrey and coltsfoot. And they go really well in teas. And when you do make a tea, I mean, the water does not extract much in the way of pyrrolizine alkaloids. It may not get rid of, the extraction process may not eliminate all of it, but most of it.
And I just want to, can I just add, make sure you use your coltsfoot dried.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Yes. Oh, Linda, please jump in. I meant to mention that. Anytime that you have something you'd like to share. Absolutely.
Madeline, can I interrupt you just for a moment? Just a question. On the first level apprenticeship, you had so graciously given us those informational booklets, which was so helpful for me. Will there be any type of booklet like that once we finally get together that will be distributed to us?
Well, I think what we're going to do is send documents online. So there won't be a booklet in your hand, but as we cover material, we will send, and as the visiting teachers cover material, we'll ask them to, send the documents. So I think right now that's the way we're doing it. But
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
I personally appreciate that. I don't think we've got enough trees to keep just printing everything we love, so I think it's a good idea.
Absolutely.
I have one quick question. What were that you had mentioned two herbs, comfrey, and what was the second one?
Oh, coltsfoot.
Could you spell that?
Oh yeah, COLTSFOOT, as in horse. Coltsfoot.
Okay. And that's what, Linda, you had said to use dry?
Yeah, both that and wild cherry contain a certain level of cyanide, and they have to be dried completely before you can process them, just to, it gets the cyanide out of the plant material.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important.
I have a question as well.
Yeah.
Going back to black-eyed Susan, bunch of different plants that look the same. You know the botanical name of that?
I do. Oh, wait a second. I have it on another page. It's something like Rudbeckia ursa.
Is that the one? Okay.
Yeah. That's the one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
Can you just briefly go over the dosage on lobelia?
Oh, right. Good point. Yeah.
The best form, I think it's a tincture usually. I usually use just a few drops. So if you could just say something.
No, that's important. And I'll be talking about lobelia a little bit later too, but yeah, just a couple of drops. I mean, because lobelia is a medic in higher dosages. So if you're doing it if you're doing it alone, a couple of drops, sometimes I put a tiny amount in a formula with other herbs, but just a few drops, 5, 6, 7, 8 drops in a formula, because it's also diluted. So that's basically how I do it. Do you have any thoughts yourself, Patrick? Okay, 1 second.
No, not really. Sorry, I muted myself. No, I use it because I have asthma and I have, I don't like to use inhalers and that sort of thing. So I have a tincture of it. I don't use it that much for patients unless they really need it. But sometimes, if a person's about to be put on prednisone or something like that, I like to have it on hand, just so I have, okay, I'm going to try this, and I just use a few drops. And you can use a few drops and then just wait and see what the effect is.
Exactly.
But it's not a drop or a full thing. I just want to make sure.
Absolutely. No, it's good to point that out. I mean, I think it's invaluable for people who have asthma and lung, really sort of lung issues, serious lung issues. So
yeah, it's almost like a slow inhaler.
Yeah. You just take it. In fact, what I find is that when I put a bottle of lobelia in someone's hand, they start taking deeper breaths.
Yeah.
It's just totally amazing, and I love it. And I wish. I mean, a number of years ago, I was able to get a hold of Ma Huang, which they're using a lot in China now, I hear.
Yeah.
For this, and it would be beautiful because that really opens the lungs. But if we can't get a hold of that, I really like lobelia, and I also like skunk cabbage. Not the same, but I think it really opens and does a lot of good things.
It's been difficult to get Ma Huang here, and so a lot of the herbal forums on Facebook and stuff, everybody has their sort of like their favorite Ma Huang substitute, and there's different herbs that people use to try to, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 herbs to try to mimic
the
effects of Ma Huang. So that's kind of a theme on a lot of Chinese medicine, herbal medicine discussion groups.
Yeah, I can understand. I would love to get my hands on it, but there it is. What is it? There's a form that's similar that grows not around here, and I'll have to get the name of it. I know Phyllis Light thinks it's close to it, and it's called something. I'll get the name of it. I'll get back to people about it. Okay.
Can I just put on the lobelia as a person that uses it for all my asthma clients? Typically, I do 15 drops per ounce.
You do? Okay.
And so it's still very diluted, but it is the closest thing we have to ephedra, and it grows everywhere in the Northeast. If you let your lawn grow, within a year you'll have lobelia growing in your yard. So it's an abundant herb in our environment and really important.
Thank you. Yeah. I'd say experiment with the amount that works for you if you're using it for yourself. Thinning the mucus helps to break down stagnation, ultimately reduces coldness in the system. And you can use these plants at any stage of the infection, because we always need to thin the mucus, basically. So let's look at the coronavirus and how it enters our system. This is kind of interesting to me. So a virus is made of genetic material, basically RNA or DNA or both. It is a package of genetic instructions enclosed in a protective shell, than usually protein. This shell can be damaged by liquid over 60% alcohol. I've sort of been learning. And I'm not going to talk a lot about wipes and sprays because there's been so much information out there. But if you're not able to find rubbing alcohol, which is presently somewhat hard to find, check out grain alcohol, once again, at the liquor store. It's expensive, you know, but if you really want to get something that is, well, this is 180 proof, you know, and it can be dilated down to 120 proof or 60% alcohol. So for hand sanitizers, you can combine grain alcohol with aloe or glycerin, if you have glycerin, to diminish the harshness of the alcohol. It's very harsh. You wouldn't want to just continually put it on your hands. And, you know, 2-to-1 ratio is considered reasonable. So 2 parts alcohol to 1 part aloe or glycerin. So, okay, getting back to viruses. Viruses are inert and can sit on surfaces, as we know.
Madeline,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm stopping you, but I have a question. So how can, I heard that you have to keep the alcohol strength at 160 proof to be effective. So how it's possible to do this with 2-on-1 alcohol to glycerin?
Okay, thank you. I had heard 120 or 60% alcohol is what I've heard. So I was thinking that would work. That's kind of what I've been doing.
Okay. So
yeah, that's been my
different. Yeah, different.
Yeah.
So.
But you know, people can decide if you want to be extra cautious, go with a higher percentage if that feels right to you.
Also, with any of these alcohol-based or anything you make yourself, you definitely want to put some essential oils in there that are going to potentialize and potentiate the antiviral and killing properties.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even tea tree oil. And there are a number of them. Okay.
I just want to say, you know, I made that spray, and just so you guys know, it was very interesting to me how the alcohol and the glycerin would not emulsify until I added the essential oil, which was very interesting that it was the essential oil that forced it all to mix beautifully. So, you know, really what I've understood is you can use either alcohol or thymol. Like thyme is the one oil that they've really found works. But it's not necessary to use both. But without both, you don't get that incorporation. So it's really nice the way the oils bring the 2 other substances together.
Thank you, Linda. That's really good information. Okay, so as I mentioned, viruses sit for varying amounts of time, you know, on a surface until a host comes along, and they do not meet the standard definitions of life. They're not a cell, they have no metabolism, no respiration. Their lifespan depends on their host cell, and they need a host cell to reproduce. So basically, excuse me, they are genetic material that mutates and combines. The coronavirus is a single-stranded RNA virus, one of the largest of its type, so that it has a lot of resources, genetic instructions to respond to its environment. And of course, so far, it's been pretty successful that way. The virus can survive on cardboard for about a day, is my understanding, on plastic and steel for 2 to 3 days. And here is interesting, it's interesting too. It's suspended in droplets in the air from 1/2 hour to 3 hours. And there are varying estimates about that. There was a study published recently in the New England Journal of Medicine based on some research indicating that it can stay suspended in an aerosolized form for 1/2 hour. But the amount of viable virus decreases sharply over time when it's on a surface, or I'm not sure about suspension. And the virus that causes COVID-19 actually has a genetic similarity to SARS. And so we can look at some of the medicinal plants that were successful in or helpful in addressing SARS and apply them to this virus. Once again, all viruses need a host to reproduce. Since they're not cells, they need to connect with cells. So here is what happens. The periphery of the coronavirus, and maybe you've probably all seen photos of it, is covered with spikes made of protein, which are somewhat formidable looking, really kind of interesting, which are able to attach to a particular receptor called an ACE receptor, angiotensin converting enzyme, which is found on the surface of cells lining the airways. It's also found somewhat in the digestive tract, but these are, the airways are rich in these ACE2 receptor cells. When the coronavirus binds to the receptor, it's able to enter the host cell and basically hijack the host's genetic material. What it does is the coronavirus's genetic material becomes part of the cell's DNA. There's a fusing that goes on. I think about it when you talked about glyphosate also fusing. It's interesting about just that process. When the cells reproduce, they replicate the viral genetic information. Eventually, this virus can destroy a cell, if it builds up, and causing it to explode and spread the viral information to other cells. So that's, how it spreads. The ACE2 receptors are also, and this is really important, the ACE2 receptors are also found on cilia, these tiny hairs or brushes which clear the lungs of excess mucus and particles with an upward sweeping rhythmic action, allowing us to breathe more easily. They kind of sweep the lungs of debris. The cilia are damaged by the coronavirus, so and it leads to a buildup of bacteria and possibly secondary infections. The lungs, once again, we talked about this, fill with mucus, which hardens and thickens, as the disease progresses, making it hard to expectorate and for lungs to expand and contract. As I mentioned, the lungs can be weakened. Phyllis Light suggests that we not use a heating pad on the chest. And there are some wonderful poultices you can put on the chest, but apparently a heating pad can overheat the heart, which is naturally what we don't want to do. So there are a number of herbs that help with cilia, which I'll be mentioning. Nitric oxide, which is found in garlic, helps to support the cilia. Matthew Wood calls mullein a great remedy for the cilia, and also mentions comfrey. That makes a lot of sense. They're both so soothing and lung protective and tonic. And they also help thin the mucus. So stimulsin, thinning of mucus. Cordyceps, that's a herb, well, basically not an herb, it's a fungus of sorts, or parasite. And it, we've found out about it through Chinese medicine. So cordyceps and the berberine plants, golden seal, barberry, Oregon grape, coptis, which is gold thread, as well as one of my personal favorites, Biden's beggar's tick, and cryptolepis, all protect the cilia. So we've got a large selection here. And these herbs can be taken during the time we want to protect ourselves, as well as during infection. So these are some herbs to consider because you want to continue to basically strengthen the lungs and protect the cilia. A good formula for, which relies on basically local herbs, could include mullein, beggar's tick, or golden seal. And if you have cordyceps, you could add that to it. So that, I think, well, and you can combine a number of these words, but that's one that sort of comes to me as a very nice combination. The coronavirus is currently, relatively stable. Now, all viruses mutate, but this virus has had so far only minor mutations. So the current thinking is that it will not be that challenging to develop a vaccine to combat it. Now, here's something that Phyllis Light has suggested. I have not found haven't found other references to this, but it makes sense to me. She suggests that a virus, well, of course, has an incentive not to be deadly for an extended period of time since it needs a host to reproduce. It depends on us, not like bacteria, which really don't. So over time, viruses tend to weaken, and we've seen that in a number of viruses. And some people have suggested that with the AIDS virus, people are living longer, not simply because of the medications, but because the virus over time has somewhat weakened. There are several stages of the disease, but before we address them, it makes sense to focus on protection. And I'm just wondering, Tommy, if you would like to start, talking about protection at this point.
Sure. I do want to talk about the virus itself for a little bit.
Sure.
One thing to just to consider, our 1,000% of our focus has all of a sudden been focused on this virus and this pandemic. All of our media, everything, everybody's focused. And there's been a tremendous amount of misinformation and a tremendous amount of look over here. And I had a teacher, his name was Carl Slick. And we had a teacher, I should say. And Carl Slick, his main teaching to all of the people who worked with him was to question everything. And when the big structure says, look over here, look behind where they're telling you to look. So I was listening to a scientist, and he was talking about the 1918 outbreak. And what I found to be fascinating about what he was saying is that when that outbreak of that viral infection happened, it was right after the whole world became electrified. And what he was saying is that our body is electrical. Our body is vibrational. And our body has a bunch of minerals in it that we were talking about earlier, responsible for all these very fine functions. And so what he was saying is the electromagnetic field exposure that we all had in those times, that the culture had, and cultures all over the world, became electrified very quickly. And what he was saying is the virus was the body's response to the toxins stored in the body. And it was the body emitting this toxic material into this viral chemical structure and releasing it into the environment. And I found that to be quite fascinating because it correlates to us becoming completely irradiated with 5G Wi-Fi. And it correlates directly to the Wuhan, the city of Wuhan being the very first city to go 100% 5G. And that right after they went 100% 5G in December, this outbreak happened. And so it's important to consider that this virus, wherever it came from, that this electromagnetic field, this new field that the entire planet is now going to be incorporated within this 5G network. From the satellites down, we're all being affected by this electromagnetic fielding. So back in 1918, in the early 1900s, the Earth became extremely extremely toxic with heavy metals because of all the coal burning. That for about 100 years before that, they used coal burning for all the steam engines, and all the steam engines were responsible for everything that got built. All the steel was manufactured from steam fire plants that were processing those steel. So the planet became very, very toxic very quickly. And then they brought in this, all of a sudden, this new electricity. And everyone's been exposed to this new electricity. And now we've gotten used to that electricity. And now we're being exposed to another new electricity. So I find that that's a very interesting concept to pay attention to. And I want to encourage people, turn your Wi-Fi off at night, not your phone. Go to the Wi-Fi unit in your house and turn it off. Unplug it or turn the switch off when you're sleeping. Because you're being irradiated with that Wi-Fi. And if it's 5G, it's 5G means it's 60 gigahertz of electrovibrational energy that our body's being exposed to. 60 gigahertz. So we know the electricity in our wall is 60 hertz. 60 gigahertz is 1,000,000 times that intensity in electromagnetic field. So we know that being too close to our electrical outlets can cause cancer. So I'm looking at this information that's coming across, and it's not generally out there, but I believe it's very viable information and information that we all need to consider. Turn off your Wi-Fi, turn off your phone, separate your phone, put your phone on airplane mode with no Wi-Fi while it's on airplane mode. Turn your phone on to use it, turn it off. That's going to give you personal freedom and psychic space as well. And that's one of the things I believe this whole thing has happened so that we can start to appreciate our personal space again.
Tommy, quick question for you. Could you just say again the connection between and I've heard a little bit about what you're saying with 5G before, but could you talk about, is 5G causing the virus or is it exacerbating it?
Well, there's a lot of controversy about the virus itself, and I could get quite political if I go that direction, so I'm going to restrain myself. So what this particular scientist was saying is that when the body is exposed to, now let's say we've gotten used to all the toxins in our environment, and all those toxins are living inside of us, the glyphosate and the heavy metals, and all these toxins are stored in our tissues. And now we're being exposed to this new electrical magnetic field, and the body's freaking out. And so the body actually releases that toxic material into a set of genetic code structure called a virus. Now, this is this one scientist's theory, and I don't want to throw that theory out. I think it's a very important and very interesting thing to consider. And once one person or two or five, or maybe in Wuhan, thousands of people are releasing these toxins, and this toxic genetic material comes out, it comes out as a viral contagion, making other people sick. That was his theory. I think it's pretty fascinating. So, question everything, especially the more the media says something, the more you want to question it. That's just my take. So
Tommy,
yeah.
Tommy, let me ask you this. I completely 100% agree with this particular scientist, and the YouTube link that Linda had sent is amazing, and I highly recommend everybody watch it. But isn't it interesting how we're all quarantined and yet we are all using Wi-Fi more than we usually would because we are all at home, right?
I know. And is that by design? Is that by design?
Oh,
It's an interesting conundrum that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
Now we all want faster, more effective Wi-Fi because now we're all experiencing it, right? Or maybe we already have 5G inserted in our house and don't even know it, right? And we're all being irradiated with that 5G when we're glued to our screens. And then now we're glued to our screens maybe 10 times as much as we were before. Everyone's hypervigilantly researching.
Right, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. If the, I mean, I could be wrong, but people, I don't know, I don't want to word this in the wrong way, but is this as contagious as the media is telling us based off of, you know, maybe the research that you, Madeline and Tommy have? I guess that's me questioning everything.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a good question. I want to say this. As far as we know, it's true that thousands and thousands of people are dying. I think that's true. So lots of people are dying, and it seems like the truth is lots of people are dying from what looks like this virus. But it could also be true that lots of people are dying from auto intoxication that we were talking about before in Liver Talk.
Right, which is inherently coming from our own body's inability to process this new virus.
Well,
potentially.
Not just that. So think about it again. I think you were the one I asked how old you are, how young you were.
Yeah.
Okay, so for that whole 26 years of your life, you've been being toxified by glyphosate. And heavy metals are in our air, they're in our water, they're in our food, and they're in our cells. So when we get exposed to electromagnetic radiation, all those heavy metals, they start to move around and they cause disease. They are actually causing auto-intoxication.
Gotcha.
Because when you move metals without binding to them, they cause illness, they cause disease.
Right.
Right? Very important piece to consider.
I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, regardless of where you think the virus might come from, I think, you know, it's important to realize that a warming climate makes viruses such as coronavirus more hospitable. And so acknowledging that a warming planet also makes this kind of thing easier. And also, you know, the debate about whether it came from bats, which is what people are thinking, that it's zoonotic. And in Wuhan, they don't have well-regulated what they call wet markets. So there's live animals mixed with, you know, slaughtered animals that people are selling in very close spaces that aren't very clean sometimes. And, you know, the more and that these viruses tend to crop up when we're now at a point where there's very few places on Earth that humans haven't really touched. And so we're really getting into like some of the last places on Earth that like viruses, like they exist in animals in the wild, and humans don't come and you know, humans haven't been in touch with them because these are some places that people just don't go. And now we're like getting into the last places on earth that are really truly wild, and people are bringing these things back and exposing them to other humans. So I think it's also interesting and important to realize that it's also about, you know, how do we get rid of all the bats, but it's like, how do we conserve these spaces in the world so that we're not having to, you know, destroy them for capitalism or for whatever. And how
maybe a pandemic is actually Mother Nature cleansing the earth, right? Because the microcosm and the macrocosm always mirror to each other. Evidence of that is the Lyme disease carrying tick called the black-legged tick. That tick came off of monkeys that were brought from remote places.
You're
in
muted
Africa.
on my computer, Tommy.
I am?
Yeah, you were for a couple moments. I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
But you're not now, so.
So the black-legged tick came from remote places in Africa, and they brought it to Plum Island, Long Island, to do testing on the monkeys, not knowing that the tick was there, supposedly not knowing, but that's where the tick originated. So it took about 30 to 40 years for the black-legged tick to overpopulate and take over the United States. But it's because it was brought from a very distant region, a very protected place where those monkeys only lived in that one place. But we use those monkeys for medical testing. And so upon the black-legged tick, Lyme disease was accidentally released out of a medical lab. Now, we know that's a historical experience that happened. Now, so that was back in the 1950s and 60s that Plum Island, Long Island was a medical biotech lab called Lab 257. So, you know, again, I'm not here to force anybody or to create a belief. I'm here to create a challenge to your beliefs and get you to think out of the boxes that the media is wanting to put us into. That's all. So, but I'm going to prevention. I just really wanted to make that point about the electrical field that we're all being exposed to.
Tommy, I think I'd like to just add one more thing. And in addition to what you're saying, it's the role of trauma, which certainly suppresses the immune system. And what they found, of course, is that during the pandemic of 1918, a lot of the younger people were more vulnerable than the older people. It's possible that a similar virus had come around 20 years earlier, and a number of the older people had developed, immunity to it. But the younger people, I think I've mentioned this in class, the younger people were traumatized by the experience of World War I. The people, the men had either seen battle or lost people, and the young women had lost, loved ones. And so they were much more vulnerable. Right now, that's not happening, but my only guess around that is that the young people still have more vitality to deal with all these compromising processes along with trauma, whereas older people are, much more vulnerable because they've really been, because their systems are weakened and are less hardy in terms of, dealing with these, with the glyphosate and these other processes.
Right, and so Karen just made this point that we're in a closed system. Our body's becoming a closed system if it's not able to detoxify. And so the talk about the glyphosate is causing our body to self-intoxicate. And that's really important because once the system becomes closed, we can't get rid of the toxins. And they just accumulate, and we breathe them in, we eat them, they come in through our skin. And the 5G is this intensifier and this it super potentiates this internal toxicity. I think it's really important for people to get. Yeah, and the 5G is doing the same thing to the electrical field of the earth as well. So when it comes to prevention, Madeline talked about the ACE2 inhibiting substances. They're all really, really important. All the herbs, really important stuff.
Can I just ask, will everybody mute themselves? There's some background noises happening.
I don't know why it keeps coming up, but okay. Keeping your mucous membranes fluid is one of your best defenses. So we use the oil of oregano, not essential oil, but oil of oregano. And at the first sign of a tickle in the back of the nose, or a tickle in the throat, or the sensation of the train coming in where our energy field feels like it's like buzzy, and you feel the virus exposure, you can take the oregano, and truthfully, you can take that oregano every day as a prevention. And the second you get sick, you can take more of it. You can also take it in capsules. And if you can, it's a great substance because you can take it all throughout every phase of getting sick or being sick with pneumonia. And oregano is amazing. So it's very, very good. And you can make your own oregano oil. It's infused fresh plant of oregano. You can also use fresh plant of thyme, infuse it in olive oil. And what I would do is infuse it once. And by the way, you want to grow these herbs and grow a lot of them, because if things are going to repeat, like history repeats itself, this thing's probably going to spin around in the fall and bite us in the butt. So you have this summer to make a bunch of herbal preparations to get ready. And you can make a triple infusion of oregano into olive oil, super potent, and you can make your own. So
Can I just add, all of the citrus essential oils also thin mucus. So if you're fortunate enough to have a really good diffuser, that's awesome, but you can steam with those oils. I just always need to say that you have to buy practitioner grade oils, or you're just making yourself sicker. And you can reach out, and maybe what I'll do is I'll post the phone number where I purchase my oils so everyone can be sure to get quality oils.
great, thank you, Linda. And here's the diffuser. The professional grade diffuser vibrates at 22 million cycles per second. And it breaks the oils down into the smallest possible microscopic particle that, when absorbed, they're the best treatment for any kind of lung or breathing respiratory condition of virtually any kind, but also very protective.
Can you go over how to make a triple infusion?
So you take olive oil and you stuff as much fresh plant into that olive oil as you can, keeping the plant below the surface of the oil. And you can ever so mildly warm that, or you can let it sit for a few weeks, and you strain the plant out, and then you put fresh plant into the same oil.
Okay, I've never done that before.
You do it 3 times. Incidentally, for those who want to make echinacea tinctures or black-eyed Susan tinctures, what I would suggest is, in the spring, harvest the leaves and put the leaves in tincture, and then let them sit. And then into the summer, when the flower is in its full bloom, you strain out the tincture, keep the alcohol, fill that same tincture with flowers, and then let that sit until the fall. After the first frost, then you dig up the roots and you strain out your tincture, and you put the roots in the same alcohol. right? So you're making a triple tincture out of root, flower, and leaf, and that is by far the best tincture I've ever experienced of echinacea or black-eyed Susan. So one of the herbs we can grow, and it makes sense to grow it because it's a Chinese herb, but and there are folks in the United States that are growing it now, and it's astragalus. And astragalus strengthens your resistance. And astragalus modulates your immune system so that it is armed and ready to see the virus and shut it down before it comes in. That's what astragalus does, and it's dependable. Now, astragalus strengthens your resistance, and one of the things it does is it closes your pores. So astragalus is a preventative herb, and it's not an herb for treatment.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I've just read with like TCM that they say to take astragalus powder every day or the root, and with you saying that it closes your pores, going back to like the indigenous cultures, how they eat certain things at certain times of the year because their pores open and close, would you suggest not taking it then in the summer since your pores are supposed to be open?
Right, exactly. So in the summertime is when we don't need astragalus.
Okay.
Right, so we want to start taking astragalus early in the fall. You can take it all winter long, and then you stop taking it once the conditions start to heat up again. And usually that's the same cycle of the viruses, if you've ever noticed that, right?
Yeah.
So good question. So you don't take astragalus for treatment, you only take it for prevention. And if you were to continue to take it and it's keeping your pores closed, that's actually counterintuitive for what we want to do by opening the pores to get the fluids out of the body. So you can't break a fever if you can't sweat. So some of the ACE2 inhibitors, flaxseed is an ACE2 inhibitor. Citrus peel, like Linda said about the citrus essential oils. The citrus peel has a lot of essential oils in it. Let's see, orange peel, oregano, garlic, ginger, elderberry, turmeric. So those are all preventatives. Thyme tea. You guys are going to have I already emailed to everybody the notes, so you have a garlic, ginger, lemon tea that Karen and I make and we drink all winter long. At first sign of anybody coming into our house with a virus, we've got that tea on the stove. And it's simple to make. It's a whole bulb of garlic, chopped fine, in 2 quarts of water. And you put half that amount of chopped ginger, and then you bring it to a boil, turn it down. It's beautiful. The whole house smells of this great ginger garlic aroma. And then you let it boil for 1 or 2 minutes, and you turn it down to as low as you can. And when you're ready to drink it, you add in 1 whole squeezed lemon to the whole pot. And you can add cayenne pepper. You can add your whatever sweetener you feel like you need to have. We drink it without sweeteners. I'll often put elderberry into my garlic, lemon, ginger tea. But that tea is fantastic. Now, another piece about prevention is our media is going around telling everybody, don't wear masks. And I think that's insane. It's insane behavior. When Karen or I get sick, we sleep in the same bed. We sleep right next to each other, shoulder to shoulder. If Karen gets sick, I go to bed with a mask. And I take my favorite essential oil blend and I put a few drops of that essential oil blend on my mask. And if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll put a couple more on there. I use the hospital style masks that loop over my ear, so they're not going to choke me. And I don't get sick. I haven't caught a cold or a flu from Karen for years because of that behavior. When I get sick, I still wear the mask. And I still put the essential oils on the mask. And Karen hasn't gotten sick from me for years. So that's really important. You can walk into any store, any environment that has a lot of people, and you can put those drops on your mask. And all of the air that you're breathing is going to be filtered through those essential oils, and those essential oils kill the virus, or at least deter the virus. So
you use thyme? Sorry.
Would you like to know the formula?
Yes.
I'll read it off to you. And these are aromausa.com oils. So it's eucalyptus radiata. 60 drops of that. This is the formula. So you'll be making this formula and then using drops out of it. So 60 drops eucalyptus, 40 drops rosemary, 20 drops sea pine, 20 drops turpentine, 40 drops frankincense, and 20 drops thyme. And you can put oregano in there too. I maybe put 10 drops of oregano in there. So here's my formula. Now, I also cheat. I have a beard and mustache. I don't see anybody else in the group that has a beard and mustache. Maybe Regis. But I put these essential oils right on my beard and mustache. So the air I'm breathing is actually being treated as I'm breathing it. Same principle as having a mask and breathing the oils through the mask.
Tommy, I just want to remind people that once essential oils are blended, they're only good for 6 months. So, if you make this blend up, that's awesome. Just remember, you're going to probably need to make it anew come winter time so that it's still chemically active.
Yeah. So I'll use that formula makes only a half of a bottle or less of one of these 15 ml bottles. So it's not a huge formula, and I usually will use that up. If we're trying to protect ourselves, I'll use that up in maybe 2 weeks.
I have a question. Sorry.
Before you do, I also put the same formula in the diffuser I showed you, and I have that running a lot. So Madeline was going to be here today, so I had it running so that the air was going to be nice and cleared for her. Essential oils can kill airborne microbes. So your question.
Do you have a suggestion for people, like maybe an alternative to wearing a surgical mask when out, just because I'm really a firm believer at this time that there really isn't enough masks for everyone to be wearing, and we need to be really conscientious of saving that supply for our frontline workers who are in hospitals, and there's not enough, and maybe at a time if we had a better supply that would be different, but we don't. And so it's not, I mean, and I'm a nurse and I'm having to answer questions, people asking me these things, and I do not recommend that people who are not sick do not wear a mask, because even if you could find them, which I think they're hard to find, I mean, it's just some people in hospitals, they're having to reuse a mask. They get one a shift, and that's it. And that's
Totally. We're all watching the news. We all get that point very, very well. Everybody can make their own mask. The mask can be any kind of cloth that you breathe through, right? So everybody can make their own masks, and people who have sewing machines are starting to make masks for the medical system. Our whole culture can become involved in this prevention piece. But we have a medical system and a media system that's telling people not to wear masks. So you can make a mask out of a bandana. You can make a mask out of a t-shirt, especially if you're putting the essential oils on the mask. That's going to be majorly protective.
Every time I fly, I wear a scarf that I douse in essential oils because the oxygen's recirculated on the plane. And the beauty of a scarf is it's really easy to take off. If you're in the medical field and you can't change your masks regularly, I would just add a drop of essential oil of time between every single patient, and that'll absolutely keep you safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there,
One more word on masks. I mean, COVID definitely needs the N95 mask. My son's a lung doctor and they've run out of them. You know, it's not a regular cloth mask that's going to help with necessarily with COVID. Just to make sure you don't think you're really safe with a regular mask. It's really
right. So the point that I'm making about the mask,
yeah,
is that any mask you wear, you should put essential oils on it. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Agreed.
Okay?
Just don't.
So it doesn't. The mask doesn't matter. Any mask you wear, even the best mask, should have essential oils on it for our protection. If you're sick and you have this virus, you should be wearing a mask and putting essential oils on it if you're going to be around anybody. So we have to protect ourselves and protect everybody else from us if we get this.
It's just not 100% protection for COVID, from what I understand from my son who's a lung doctor.
je leur ai écrit un message, tu peux écrire des messages, tu me laisses tranquille.
What are you saying, Regis?
Oh, my mic is on.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there's a lot of masks to find and buy on Etsy. A lot of people are making masks, and I believe they work, especially if we add essential oils. So yeah, it's possible to find masks, and we can make our own. I mean, it's easy. Yeah.
Let's be really clear about these masks. The normal hospital masks, they're very lacking in their ability to protect, because they're opened on the sides, they're opened underneath, and they're opened around the sides of the nose. There's no mask unless you're wearing a respirator that's got charcoal filters on it and sealed against your skin. There's no mask that's going to 100% protect anybody. That's why I'm trying to make this point about the essential oils. Using the essential oils on the mask, right? So that's really important for protection. And it's a layer of protection. It's a very important layer of protection.
I have two quick questions. Number one is the berberine plants. Can I get some clarification around those? Because in the past I've heard that using like Oregon grape or maybe also golden seal, that those are supposed to be only used short term. So that's my first question. And then my second question is about echinacea. If you're growing your own echinacea, like I really try and grow a lot of my own medicinal plants, I've heard that it's not fully medicinal in the root until like the third or second year. So curious about your thoughts about those two things.
Definitely want to, you definitely want to try to get the echinacea to mature before harvesting the roots.
Gotcha.
So in the first couple of seasons, you can harvest the leaves and you can harvest the flowers as much as you want, right? And let those roots grow, and let them divide them up so they're abundant. And then that third year, you can start harvesting the roots.
Okay.
Now, oh yeah, the question about the berberine plants.
Yes.
My thinking is that when you make it, when you include them in a formula, and particularly, I mean, golden seal and possibly some of the others are mucous membrane tonics. I think it's really important. We're not taking a huge amount of it in a formula. And if we take it in small dosages on a daily basis, my own personal thinking is that should be okay.
Okay.
And because of the, emergency, the situation is an emergency.
Yeah.
Got
In large doses, you would only want to take it, like, here's large doses, 2 capsules, 3 times a day of golden seal root powder. That's concentrated powder. You'd only want to do that for 14 days. But
Right.
you would
All
want to do that for more than 14 days anyway. Right?
Yeah.
And you would never sit down and drink a honking cup of golden seal tea all by itself. Right? If you did, you wouldn't do it for 14 days, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
So,
I just know some herbalists say, like, for a period of time, I was taking Oregon grape in tincture form, 2 droppers full once a day. And I noticed some effects just on my levels of fatigue. Like, I was very fatigued, and like, I don't know, I just had this level of exhaustion that I was experiencing. And then the herbalist that I was working with told me that it's not smart to be taking that every single day, but I guess maybe she's just referring to what you're saying too.
That's a lot.
That is a lot, but there might be something else going on there if I can. So whenever you take a berberine, berberines are going to kill off viruses, funguses, and bacteria. And if you take that much of a berberine, you're going to get die-off experience of yeast, and it's called a Herxheimer reaction. And you're going to get a yeast die-off that's going to make you feel tired and lethargic, and those are all die-off symptoms.
Gotcha.
So
all right.
just know that when you use something that kills, look for the die-off experience. And a lot of people don't know that happens. So
yeah.
Gotcha.
Tommy, I was just thinking it might be a time for a break now because we've been going for a while.
Okay, we can do that. Everybody up for a 5
Tommy,
minute
I
break?
have.
Now let's say 10 minutes, 10-minute break.
Tommy, I have a question. The astragalus, we use the roots or the leaves?
No, it's the roots. It's the roots. Yeah. We'll be back in 10. Somebody's going to have to remind me to read this recording again. So continuing on the topic of prevention, one thing it's important to say is Karen and I don't use masks. We don't have masks. We don't use gloves. We haven't tried to buy these or anything. I just simply use a tissue over my face when I'm going to bed, and I put a couple of essential oils on that tissue to protect myself while I'm breathing, if I think my partner has a cold or a flu. So these are just really simple things that we can each do to protect ourselves and protect somebody else if we know we're a carrier. Because the essential oils are very helpful in that way. I spoke of oil of oregano. Here's a great particular product that's nice, and there's many versions of this out there. And simple oil of oregano. And they usually have a high content. This has 80% carbachol in it. Carbachol in it. And then my favorite is colloidal silver as a protection. And colloidal silver is wonderful. This is a 20 ppm version of colloidal silver. Very effective stuff. And I have it in a sinus spray. So if I'm out and about and somebody walks by me and coughs or sneezes, and I can use it right away. So that's very helpful, nice preventative.
Tommy, can you just say a word about how you feel colloidal silver works as a preventative?
It's antiviral. So all of the silverware in the richest people's homes for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years, have been silver plated or gold plated. And that's because no bacteria, fungus, or virus can grow in a solution of silver or on silver or gold. And so colloidal silver, when it's in proper solution, it actually kills anything in the solution with it. So as a sinus spray, that solution comes into our sinuses, and anything that is microbial based is killed off.
And so you have no concerns about it being a heavy metal?
I have no concerns about it being heavy metal. No, never have. But colloidal silver, you know, there's as much as 500 ppm, and obviously the stronger it is, the better it is. I have been using colloidal silver with people since probably 2006. I've never seen anyone have a side effect from it, and I've never seen it not work. It's very helpful. But it's for this viral situation, it's best used for short periods for prevention, and because it is a very broad spectrum antimicrobial. So another one of our friends is the propolis, and you can get propolis in many forms, tincture. You can get propolis in the liquid little tiny glass vials, and you can get it in these gel caps. And this is great stuff, and very, very effective. Donald Yance has a company, or works with a company called Natura, and Natura has a throat and gland spray. I'm completely out of it. That is awesome, and one of the main ingredients is propolis. So that's great stuff. Colloidal silver. And then I wanted to talk about prevention, antiviral prevention and treatment formula that I came up with. And this has a bunch of herbs you'll be familiar with. So the first herb is Chinese skullcap, the bicol skullcap. And I'll give you the formula. So it's 3 parts bicol, 3 parts black-eyed Susan, 3 parts andrographis, 3 parts elderberry, 2 parts ginger, 2 parts isatis, 2 parts lomatium, 2 parts pomegranate that I make myself, is awesome, 2 parts red root, 2 parts licorice, and 2 parts thyme. And you can add oregano in there if you want to potentiate it. This is a very, very effective antiviral, and it's a broad spectrum antiviral. So it helps with herpes, it helps with Epstein-Barr, it helps with all of the sort of autoimmune viral things, stealth viral things. So it would definitely help with this particular virus. And notice the first ingredient being bicol skullcap, and then andrographis and elderberry. All 3 of those are ACE2 inhibitors. And then I have another formula for if somebody gets to that late stage of chronic inflammation, and they are in or headed towards a cytokine cascade in the lungs. That's usually when somebody's going to die. So this is, my formula is called CytoClear. And I use these formulas with my Lyme clients on a regular basis because we have to clear inflammation out of their systems. So this is 4 parts cordyceps, 3 parts bical skullcap, 2 parts red sage, 2 parts kudzu, 2 parts motherwort, 3 parts devil's claw, and 1 to 2 parts licorice root. So those are the formulas, and I've been using the CytoClear formula for about 2 years. It's about 2 years since I formulated that, and that has been incredibly helpful for my clients. And both of these formulas can be used in acute situations, and they can be used in chronic situations.
Tommy,
So yes.
would you mind terribly sending that in a document? Because I missed a little bit of the first formula, and then the second formula, I was trying to catch up with the first formula. So I think I might have confused the 2 of them together. So would you mind sending that out in a document for us?
Yeah, I can do that. If anybody was fast enough, maybe you guys, one of you guys can just throw it into the chat. So
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
So if you don't end up with it and you want it, just email me and I'll send it.
So
Okay,
Tommy, this is Mary Beth. How are you? You have it actually in your documents already. So the documents that you sent through, it's the antiviral, it's the skull cap, the black-eyed Susan, the elderberry, the ginger, and then you have the CytoClear too.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, so it's already in the documents.
Great, thank you.
Great.
So
Tommy, I have a question. Just could you say a little bit about your thinking about adding devil's claw to the formula?
It's a broad spectrum anti-inflammatory. And so that the focus of the CytoClear is to eradicate inflammation. So we're trying to get rid of all that inflammation. It's a really great anti-inflammatory.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the antiviral and the CytoClear. So obviously, if you have a very strong state of inflammation, you want the CytoClear, especially if it's microbial based. So if it's either viral based or like all of the Lyme bacteria based inflammations where they mess with your immune cells and cause your immune system to misfire and create inflammation. So that's what I love about the CytoClear. But the antiviral, if you have an acute situation, okay, somebody sneezed in your face, and 4 days later, you're starting to come down with this thing. As soon as you realize you're coming down with this thing, you can take 60 drops, that's 2 droppers, up to like every hour for the first 24 hours. So you can hit it really hard in the beginning. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we make in herbalism is we don't take enough right away for acute situations. So 60 drops, 2 droppers, every hour for the first 24 hours. And then after that, you can take a little bit less on those consecutive days after that for as long as you need to take it to be able to get out of the situation. And that can be, 30 to 40 drops, every other hour for a few days. And then that can go down to 30 to 40 drops 3 times a day, kind of like that. So any questions on those formulas, the perspectives?
Tommy, not on the formulas, but I was just curious, are you going to talk about how elderberry is not considered the best treatment if you have been diagnosed?
So I don't agree. In the research that I've found on elderberry, there's this whole thing about elderberry causing a cytokine cascade, but that's actually looking at it from just a chemical perspective. elderberry has an ancient history of being antiviral and bringing people out of severe viral infections. So I would say this, if I had any client or any friend or any loved one get sick, I'm going to be giving them this tincture, this antiviral, and I'm also going to be giving them the CytoClear. Along with those two things, so the CytoClear is clearing away all of the cytokine cascade. So if there's any tendency for the echinacea or black-eyed Susan or elderberry to enhance cytokines, there's probably 50 different cytokines. These guys are enhancing the proper cytokines to kill the virus. So this whole thing about cytokine cascade, we have to understand the different cytokines and be able to look at the deeper science involved.
Thank you.
Along with these herbs, I'm going to be listening to my clients' symptoms. Their symptom picture is extremely important. So a dry cough, like Madeline was saying, we need moistening herbs. If someone's dry cough has gone into a dry, rattly cough, and there's, obviously plaquey, funky mucus down deep in the lungs, you got to move that mucus up and out, and you have to open the pores. So I'm going to be giving them these tinctures, but I'm also going to be customizing a tea for that person for the symptom picture that they're telling me. And if they have clear mucus, that's different. That's early stage. So they don't need the deep stage, deep lung excavation work that the pneumonia person needs. And if their mucus is yellow, it means, okay, they've got some bacterial infection starting to set in. So we want to bring in some antibacterials. And we want to bring in some expectorants too, like the colt's foot and like the comfrey and stuff. And if it starts to go down deeper into the lungs, we have to excavate that crap out of the lungs. And we have to use a different tea. But the beauty of these two formulas that I've shared with you is you can use them through the entire process of bringing them out. You can use them in the beginning for prevention, especially the antiviral, and you can take it all the way to the deepest state of this illness. I wanted to also talk about prevention from the essential oil perspective. And these are some of the oils that all have antiviral properties and can be utilized. So lemon, or any of the citruses, but the lemon is a really good one. Cloves, very strong antimicrobial. Oregano is over the top. The essential oil of oregano is so strong, it'll blister your skin. So you got to be smart with it. Peppermint, eucalyptus radiata, my favorite eucalyptus. Tea tree has some broad spectrum antimicrobial properties. Cinnamon, very warming as well. And rosemary. And rosemary opens up the periphery. Rosemary brings circulation to the brain. It helps people be more embodied. Frankincense is another favorite, and then grapefruit. So thyme is definitely in there. I mentioned that before in the other formula. So the other thing I want to talk about, and then I'll pass it back to Madeline, is there's two forms or multiple forms of vitamin C. So I instruct people, if they're going to take ascorbic acid, to take it to their bowel tolerance. And ascorbic acid That's the way you find out how much your body will let you take without getting diarrhea. So you take 1,000 milligrams every hour until you get loose stools. And then you back off 1,000 milligrams. And that's your body's limit. That's your bowel tolerance of vitamin C. So vitamin C is very antiviral. It's very antioxidant. So if there's any truth to this piece around the body being expressing these toxins, and all these toxic substances are being sort of moved around by this virus or by the EMFs or whatever it is, vitamin C is your best friend. And the body doesn't make it, nor does the body store it. So if you're not getting enough vitamin C, that leaves you open for viruses. So I instruct people to take between 6,000 and 10,000 milligrams of sodium ascorbate vitamin C per day. And I know that sounds like a lot, but as a preventative, and if somebody gets sick, it's really important for them to be taking that higher dose. And in China, many of the doctors who are more on the functional medicine side have been doing vitamin C IVs and saving people's lives. So the vitamin C is a major important player. And it's the sodium ascorbate that is the source that has a more gentle experience on your intestines.
Can you repeat that dosage, Tommy? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's 6,000 to 10,000 milligrams per day, broken up throughout the day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Another source of vitamin C is liposomal vitamin C. And so the liposome is a molecule of vitamin C embedded inside of a molecule of oil. And that's how our cells absorb. Most of what they absorb is through oil carrying nutrients into our cells. So liposomal glutathione, liposomal vitamin C, there's a whole bunch of liposomal products that are much more bioavailable. Your body, your cells actually absorb more. Another piece on prevention is selenium at 200 micrograms per day is a very strong ACE2 inhibitor. And selenium happens to be an important protector for our skin. So the lining of our lungs is part of our skin. The lining of our intestines is part of our skin. So anything that's going to have an antioxidant effect in our skin is also going to have an antioxidant effect in our lungs and our intestines. So then the other one, which is very strongly antiviral, is zinc. That's why they make these elderberry lozenges with zinc in them. Zinc is important during any protection phase, acute phase, and chronic phase. But you want to, once someone goes, deeper into the chronic phase, you want to only be doing like maybe 25 milligrams of zinc a day. You don't want to overdo the zinc if they're chronic, if they've gone into that deep lung excavation place. And the vitamin D3 goes without saying, another powerful antioxidant. And we need as much sun exposure for real vitamin D synthesis, and we need to supplement with vitamin D3 as well. Let's see. Another herb that hasn't been mentioned today is olive leaf. So did you have a question? Forget who that is.
I do. It's Kat. For zinc, what do you recommend for preventative dosage?
Anywhere from 50 to 100 milligrams a day.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. So olive leaf, and again, the berberines, the bidens, it's all great stuff. And then we need adaptogens, you guys. Again, if there's any truth to this piece about us being inundated with electrical signals and heavy metals and glyphosate, our endocrine system is really struggling. And all the endocrine gland disruptors. So we really need these, endocrine gland healing herbs. So eleuthero, ashwagandha, one of the great herbs that has some ACE2 inhibition is rhodiola. We talked about the cordyceps and astragalus. Another one, you can never go wrong with it. You just can't go wrong with this herb. It's heart protective. It's blood protective. It's Japanese knotweed. You can never go wrong with that herb. That herb has the highest source of resveratrol. It's super protective to the body. It is immune enhancing. It is immune correcting, a major player, and it's the most invasive herb on the planet in the sense that every waterway in our entire country has Japanese knotweed growing along its banks.
Tommy, using Japanese knotweed, is it the root or the leaf? I forget.
It's the root. I don't know anyone that's ever made medicine out of the upper levels of the plant, but I have eaten the young shoots. And I imagine that if you harvested the young shoots before the stalk becomes hardened, that you would get some really great medicine out of it. But I don't know anybody that has done that.
Thank you.
What about the ashwagandha and how it, I've heard some conflicting opinions about it, how for some folks it can actually make maybe their nervous system worse or cause more anxiety and depression.
Well, when it comes to herbs, I haven't worked with you. You haven't studied with me before, but everything I say gets put on the sidelines until I listen to somebody's pulses, until I read their tongue and read their scleras and read their face. Everything is on the sidelines. And the herbs I'm going to give to my clients, I'm going to listen to their pulses. I'm going to put that herb in their hand and watch how their pulse changes. So all the adaptogens, I never give them without pulse testing them and making sure that adaptogen matches that person's system properly.
Interesting. Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
So let's see if there's any other herbs to talk about. Fishy smelling herb is a good one. Houtainia, Houttuinia, Houtainia. It's also called fishy smelling herb. I actually like the smell of that herb. But Houtainia is another broad spectrum antimicrobial. And it too has some ACE2 inhibition. We talked about liquors, Isatis, those guys all have ACE2 as well. Another one is Forsythia. That's a Chinese medicine herb, has ancient history in being used for lung and respiratory ailments. And those are...
Tommy, is that forsythia root?
No, it's forsythia berry or fruit.
Okay, thank you.
And then, yeah, you got that. Oh yeah, my deep lung excavation tea. This is to get the green, plaquey mucus up out of the lungs, to open the pores, to warm the core, and produce a fever and a sweat. So 3rd stage deep lung issues. This is a tea. 3 parts comfrey, 2 parts coltsfoot, 2 parts pleurisy root, 2 parts hyssop. This is in your notes, so you don't have to write it down. 2 parts elecampane. Very important herb. Another very important herb I haven't heard anyone else talk about, and it's 2 parts horehound. Horehound is amazing at driving the inflammatory congestion back out of the lungs. 2 parts ginger, 2 parts violet. Another herb I haven't heard anyone talking about. Violet is amazing for the lungs and amazing for the lymph. Very important. We have to move the lymph if we're going to help somebody clear the toxins out of their lungs. 2 parts licorice, 1 part wild lettuce, 1 part cayenne, and 1 part lobelia. And I have used that formula for some friends that got, now they couldn't get tested, but they got all the signs and symptoms early on. And what we did was we put them on the antiviral and we put them on the CytoClear. And when it was appropriate, we made that tea. So the one person got sick, and she was sick for 2 weeks. And for the first week of being sick, her partner was able to take care of her and give her all the herbs. And then her partner got sick. And so they were both sick for a week at the same time. But then the first person was able to start to come out of it and take care of her partner. So it was beautiful how that all worked. And they both came out of it without pneumonia, without lung damage, and are doing well now, and looking at this from the other side saying, wow, thank you so much that, we didn't have to go there.
Tommy, what was the dosage?
The tea? Or,
yeah, the tea.
So the tea, it's probably 3 cups a day. And I encourage people to drink that tea hot, because we want to open the pores, and we want to, this is the way I say it, we want to empower the fever. You never, ever want to get rid of the fever. If it's too high, you just want to mitigate it a little bit, but you never want to get rid of it. That fever's there because that is how your immune system builds antibodies towards the virus. And so our media is telling us that people that get this don't build antibodies, don't believe it, but don't medicate that fever at all cost. Right? Never extinguish a fever. When I teach my young mothers this, at first they're like freaked out, right? But then when they start to understand how it works, and the first time they let their child have a fever, and then they see that child come through it and get to the other side and be so much more healthy when they come back out. That fever is cleaning up all the other stuff in your system, bacteria, funguses, viruses. That's why people feel so bad when they get a real fever, because they're getting a Herxheimer reaction, which is what we call a die-off reaction. So Another herb that's super important is faux tea. And faux tea is a really nice adaptogen. And I would encourage you guys to look up faux tea and see if you can read about it, because it's an amazing herb, Chinese herb, very underutilized. And then I think also, you can always bring in calendula. Calendula is a warming lymphatic detoxer. So calendula is wonderful. If you need to warm, calendula is a really great liver and lymph detoxer. Okay, Madeline, back to you.
Actually, Tommy, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Which vitamin C do you use? Any particular one?
I'm using the sodium ascorbate and the liposomal.
No particular brand, though?
Oh, brand. You want to grab it for me? We'll do a show and tell.
Which do you want?
Both. So we have a capsulized liposomal from Dr. Mercola, which is a wonderful product. I really like that particular product. It's 1,000 milligram capsules. And then we have a liposomal in a squirt bottle, liquid squirt bottle by Des Bio company. And that's a wonderful vitamin C, love it.
The other one's gone. Tommy, can I throw in one more herb to ask you to comment on?
Yes, sir. Here's the liposomal squirt bottle by Des Bio. Really wonderful. This is another version, a little less expensive. You can get this online pretty easily, but it's basically the same thing, sodium ascorbate. And the liposome is phosphatidylcholine from organic sunflower seeds. You don't want any liposomal from soy. And then our other two favorites are from this Pure Synergy company. And this is their vitamin C concentrate powder. And this is all natural. It's not produced in a factory. This is all from food. Pure Synergy. And then Pure Synergy also makes a super concentrated berries powder. And this is wonderful stuff. Okay.
Thank you.
Tommy?
Did we lose that bottle?
Yeah.
We lost our Mercola bottle, but you can go on mercola.com and find it. But somebody had a question about the vitamin C.
Yeah, I have a question. It's me, Deb. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So have you ever heard of the flower? When I was in Mexico, they used for respiratory bougainvillea. It's a very beautiful flower. They use it for lungs and respiratory and clearing out mucus. Have you heard
I
of
have
it?
heard of it. I have never studied it medicinally and never used it. So, you know, if you know any information about it, send it our way.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot online. I'll send you a link if you're interested.
Great, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so any other questions?
Is there a place for sumac in all of this? I thought sumac was also very antiviral.
It is. It is. I'll be talking about it.
Oh, okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, sumac is great. And once again, we look to the native plants, which it is.
Yeah.
So, okay. Any other questions?
Just, are you going to talk about lemon balm too, Madeline, or just do you feel like that's a good one in the spectrum here?
Well, lemon balm is certainly antiviral, and we can bring it in a bit. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but definitely it's one of the wonderful herbs that is both, you know, soothing to the nervous system and antiviral as well. So, yeah. Also acts on the digestion, which is another good thing. So, okay. For prevention, it can be helpful to look at the various lines of immune defense in our body. And of course, the first line of defense is the skin. You know, the skin is a protective layer protecting us from pathogenic material. And of course, the skin, you know, regulates the opening and closing of the pores. Actually, the regulation comes from the hypothalamus, which sends messages to the skin, to the pores to open and close as is appropriate. So one thing to remember, I mean, you know, all our glands and organs are being challenged now. So to support the hypothalamus, there are 2 herbs that are specific that I know about. One is American ginseng, and the other is eleuthero. So it's good to remember them. And they're both, you know, both have basically immune function as well, and enhanced stamina. And what I heard is the Chinese herbalists used Asian ginseng at every stage of the disease because it really is such a vitalizing herb. And of course, Asian ginseng is very warm or hot, and this is a damp, cold condition. So there's a really good match there. Now, American ginseng, according to Phyllis Light, is more building than Asian ginseng, but it also has a stimulating quality. It's just not quite as warming. And you know, an old folk, so let's say, method of consuming American ginseng is to chew on the root, just tiny little bit. I've done it at different times, and you can feel the energy of ginseng, and it's also a way of preserving the root. The root actually lasts for a very long time. It's surprisingly potent after quite a number of years. So that, and of course, you know, a tincture. But the best way is to make a double decoction if you're working with a tincture. So that and eleuthero, always you know, an adaptogen and always an ally around enhancing stamina, as I said. So healthy mucous membranes also act as a barrier against the microbes. And so we need to look at mucous membrane disturbance, which, you know, of course, is going on with the virus. So we mentioned, once again, golden seal is a mucous membrane tonic. I like elder and plantain leaves. You know, I mean, I think they both can be helpful. Elder is anti-inflammatory, antiviral, and, you know, helps the swelling of mucous membranes, certainly in the sinuses, but I'm also wondering about the lungs as well. Plantain leaves strengthen mucous membrane throughout the body, anti-inflammatory, antiviral, battles infection, and reduces mucous membrane secretion, if they're excessive, that is, and supports tissue repair. So, you know, really important local herbs. Once again, elder grows all around here, and plantain leaves. You cannot, well, plantain you can't get rid of, which is a good thing. Once again, go with the invasive plants. Now, here's another one, Usnea. It's a lichen found in northern New England. You see a lot of it in Maine, sometimes called old man's beard, also called, I really like this, lungs of the forest. Powerful, we talked about this in the first level, powerful antiviral, but it also strengthens the epithelial membranes. So it's also good for prevention for strengthening, you know, strengthening mucous membranes. So a possible formula to strengthen mucous membranes, golden seal or beggar's tick, plantain, and usnea. Kind of like that combination. Now, beggar's tick. I'm sure Tommy can jump in here also about beggar's tick. You know, a great herb for the Lyme disease. And, you know, here again, a vilified herb because it's considered invasive. And as is Japanese knotweed, garlic, mustard. you know, all of them. And so what I'd say, a plant that is difficult to eradicate is helpful to address a disease that's difficult to eradicate. I mean, that's really a good signature for that. Like golden seal, beggar's tick tonifies mucous membranes in the respiratory tract, and actually in all of it, in the digestive tract, urinary tract, powerfully antiviral, and also powerfully astringent. And that's important because, you know, when fluid starts developing in the lungs, you really want astringent herbs, you know, and tighten the tissue and basically help with the release of fluid. I don't know, Tommy, do you want to say anything more about beggar's tick, Biden's? Tommy, you need to unmute.
It's one of those broad spectrum antimicrobials, and it's a very underutilized plant. It is a plant that's really easy for us to grow and propagate. And when it comes to berberines, that's rarely the case. So Biden's is one that, you know, it's growing all across the street from my house in the farm over there. And, you know, those little seeds that want to stick to your leg, you just carry those home and just plant them in your garden, and you'll get Biden's in your garden. It's not only good for, you know, this virus, but it's a really great strengthener. And I use it for UTIs. It's one of my favorite herbs for UTIs.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's a great herb. It combines really well with other things, and you know, it's one of those sleeper plants. It's kind of like, you know, until it flowers, you don't even see it. It's like hiding all the time, and then all of a sudden it flowers. You're like, oh, there you are, you know. But I love the plant. It's a great plant.
I do too. It has those. It flowers very late in the season, in late August, early September. And it has these green petal-like structures with a yellow-orange center. So it's really, you know, distinctive looking. And, you know, what I find, it grows in big clumps, so bunched together. So, you know, once again, use an herb that is so abundant and people want to get rid of. It's almost as if these plants have been talking to us for a while, and we have been slow to receive their message, which is often true.
Madeline, just to back a little bit, can you talk about ground ivy for the folks? Because that is, I think, an important herb that hasn't been mentioned.
Yeah, I was thinking of bringing it up. Yeah, ground ivy, you know, I mean, once again, ground ivy will be coming out very shortly. And it's got a little, it's like ground cover, you know, and it has these little purple flowers. And I find ground ivy to be a great, really great mucous membrane tonic and balancer. You know, I've used it for years for sinus issues, but it also is powerfully antiviral. So it has that action as well. And, you know, the other thing is it draws lead out of the soil, but it doesn't contain the lead. So there's some thinking that it draws lead out of our bodies. And I do wonder if it draws other, you know, kind of metals out of our body as well. Who knows? You know, what else do I want to say about it? I like to add ground ivy to elder and plantain. I think that they're, you know, that's a really nice combination. And, you know, if you have any, you know, congestion, I would add in some red root, you know, certainly around sinus congestion, and yerba santa. And, you know, it's interesting because we haven't really talked about yerba santa either, but as, you know, a mucous membrane herb, yerba santa, I think, is another herb to, you know, strengthen and tonify the mucous membranes. So, you know, that's more of a California plant, but definitely one. And I know the Western herbalists are also talking about yerba mansa, you know, as an herb for, you know, for this virus, for addressing, I think, you know, I'd say also the viral aspect of it.
Is the way I've used it with people in the past, and myself included, is when I get that green mucus.
Yes.
That's when I in the yerba santa, because it really helps dilate the lungs. And what I have people do is put the drops of the tincture right on their tongue and not swallow it, and just breathe it in. And the essential oils just open up and dilate the lungs, and their bronchioles open up, and then they start to cough up the mucus.
Oh, what a great description. Okay. So, and of course we know that elecampane is specific for green mucus as well. We'll be talking about that. So it's always good to remember that antihistamines dry up mucous membranes and compromise our ability to protect ourselves against pathogenic microbes. So this is really, I mean, I know a lot of people use antihistamines on a regular basis because of allergies, but important not to do that ever, but certainly important right now. And of course, mucous membranes line just about all the structures of our body. So these herbs affect just about every aspect of the body. Now, horsetail is an interesting herb, and that one was also recommended by Matthew Wood and Phyllis to strengthen the connective tissue. And what's going on is when the lungs start being compromised, you get damage to the connective tissue. And also the silica in horsetail, strengthens the mucosa. So horsetail is a really important herb. I mean, you can add it to teas. I particularly like horsetail in teas, actually, more than, in tinctures. And, a tea, a nice lung tea, and I loved your lung tea, Tommy. I've done a simpler one with first decocting elecampane and then infusing mullein and coltsfoot and hyssop. And of course, adding some horsetail to that would be really nice as well. And then adding some licorice and ginger. So that's one combination as a tea. And of course, when you have healing of the connective tissue, that can be helpful, or strengthening of the connective tissue for the stress in the lungs that can lead to microbleeding. So we want to, I think I mentioned that, we want to see if we can prevent that from happening. Okay, now, Tommy mentioned elderberry and astragalus, two major herbs for protection. And I agree that I don't see elderberry as causing a cytokine cascade. I think it also, I think my thinking about it is because basically I think of herbs as working in harmony with our bodies. And there's that intelligence of the herbs. I don't think they're going to work. I don't think elderberry is going to work to create that kind of imbalance. But in fact, all of the immune stimulants, people have been talking about echinacea too as being a problem, and I question that as well. And there's the complexity of herbs that Renelli, I think that kind of thinking is more of a medical model kind of thinking than an herbal approach. So astragalus, of course, as protection, Tommy was talking about it. It's sweet. Also, it has that warming quality, which we can all use. And the sweet taste we know is tonifying. It's restorative. And it has a specific action for the lungs. It's kind of, it's something, it's very immune enhancing, as we all know, and anti-carcinogenic, but it does have this, kind of affinity for the lungs as well. And, you hear about, traditionally it was drunk in the fall to protect the lungs and also to close the pores to protect against winter cold. Sort of known that. So it's used a lot for excessive sweating, but of course, not during, as Tommy said, not during the course of a disease, because you want to be able to keep your pores open. Astragalus also helps to stimulate production of bone marrow, which produces white blood cells. So, there you have some support of deep immunity, which is so important when you're dealing, well, forever. I mean, all the time. And so, certainly before, and also for protection after the flu has finally left, after we've recovered from it, the body is usually weakened. And this is a great herb to use in the recovery process. Okay. So I mentioned a little bit about astringents, and of course, as mucous membranes becoming congested, it becomes much more important to move fluids. It's always important to move them, but very much so now. Astringents such as staghorn sumac, an extremely antiviral, antimicrobial herb that keeps the fluids moving. It's also, a bit of a diuretic, so it helps move the fluids out of the body as well, supports the kidneys, definitely a kidney herb. And of course, the kidneys are very stressed from, how do I want to put this? The challenge to the body, the pressure on the body. Anything sour can strengthen the mucosa. And violet flowers, which are soured and astringent, very good to use preventively. Tommy mentioned they're, for the lymphatic system, and they have antiviral actions. They strengthen cellular membranes. Japanese knotweed, leaves and berries are sour and astringent. So also a great ally around astringing. And okay, lemon balm, another sour herb, lemon verbena. And here's something that I hadn't thought of, but Phyllis Light mentioned, Granny Smith apples. So, Granny Smith apples are definitely something to order. I don't think they're going to run out of it. Hydrochloric acid. Now, the next line of defense, of course, is hydrochloric acid. If pathogenic material moves into our bodies, hydrochloric acid, of course, can kill food-borne pathogens. But what if we're doing acid blockers, or if our hydrochloric acid is low, then we need to work on doing that too. And it's helpful to take apple cider vinegar, for example, for acidifying our stomach.
Madeline, can you jump in and make a note about that?
Yeah.
I'm going to tie that into the liver thing. B12, B6, and folate all have to be methylated. If they don't get methylated, we don't have proper stomach acid.
Thank you. Yes.
So that's really, I didn't get to say that before. So.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. Now, here's something that I'd like to just talk about immunity. And I've mentioned things like this before. It's proposed that immunity is a collaboration of human-associated bacteria and human immune cells. And it's interesting that, we think of ourselves as a unitary being, but really so many of our processes are a collaborative one among the bacteria and the cells in our body. There's also, Phyllis Light mentioned this, of course we have a lot of viruses in our body that are not necessarily pathogenic. So in addition to a biome, we also have a virome. And so it's important to recognize that in addition to combating pathogenic influences, we really want to focus on collaboration, which is probably one of the deepest, most important processes in life and ultimately in our bodies. To clear, and of course, we all know that antibiotics, wipe out the good bacteria and pathogenic bacteria in our gut. So that's something to also be very conscious about. So getting back to clearing out excess mucus, I've been thinking about local herbs. What about these local herbs? And I'd like to consider garlic mustard. And it's really an occasional consumption of garlic mustard. And here again, one of the most, it's probably also another herb hated by gardeners, and, an herb that a lot of energy, people put a lot of energy in getting rid of garlic mustard. And it probably is out now. I haven't really sort of looked, but I'm sure it probably is. And the leaves and flowers are extremely pungent, very much like garlic. It's extremely underutilized plant. It's diaphoretic, lowering fevers, of course, antiseptic, and vulnerary, so it heals wounds. So therefore, it's supportive of connective tissue. It helps, as I mentioned, to clear the mucus from the lungs, and it's been used traditionally to treat bronchitis, asthma, and eczema. So, I've always enjoyed, in the spring, making garlic mustard pesto, which I like to combine with parsley leaves, also very rich, nutrient rich, or adding garlic mustard leaves and flowers to salads. And the greens are very high in vitamin A, vitamin C, trace minerals, chlorophyll. Now, I haven't worked with the roots, but what I'm hearing about the roots is that they taste like horseradish and can be pickled if you're interested in doing that, or used in soups as a root vegetable. Good idea. The seeds, when ground, make a fabulous mustard sauce. All these ways. Now, here's something, and Linda was pointing out certain plants that contain cyanide. So a couple of years ago, a researcher discovered trace levels of cyanide also in garlic mustard. However, cooking eliminates it. And I imagine drying too. But, if you're only consuming a small amount occasionally, I don't think it should be a problem. So having an occasional pesto or throwing it in your salads should not be, I think, a problem. So another local resource, and what I was doing really is imagining, well, once again, if we weren't able to basically consume herbs that grow, at a distance, what would be available in our very local environment? And we have, pine needles, cedar, and spruce. So, and I haven't utilized these, and I will now, in the way I could. So you drink these, these teas to protect against viral infection or to address an infection that is settled already in your lungs. White pine, of course, is abundant in this area. What a resource. Easy to harvest. It has little bundles of 5 needles. You can do 1/2 cup to 3 cups of water, boil and simmer, decoct for 20 minutes. I've also heard of people infusing, but I think you extract more with decoctions. And then cover and let sit for several hours overnight. So pine is a stimulating antiseptic that increases oxygenation of tissues, reduces inflammation in the lungs. Bring pine needle tea to protect against infection, so we could all start doing this now, or to prevent infection from descending into the lungs. It's mucilaginous, and with that, it would, it's helpful for spasmodic coughing because we want mucilaginous herbs. Pine resin is helpful in the later stages when there's green hardened phlegm that is difficult to expectorate. So important to know that. The sticky antiseptic resin attaches itself to mucus and draws it out. So to make a tea, boil the inner bark. You'd have to, just from branches, not from the tree if you can, just scrape the inner bark off. And you would boil the inner bark slowly to release the resins, or you can simply chew the pitch. Pine is also antioxidant and anti-tumor. So this is really it's quite a plant. Cedar tea. Now, cedar, Thuya occidentalis, also arbor vitae, grows all around, cultivated all around here. And Thuya, I use Thuya in my formulas. It's a powerful antiviral. You can add 2 cups of cedar branches to 4 cups boiling water and simmer for 10 minutes. Strain and drink. Recommendation is 1 cup a day because there's some concern about thujone, which is toxic in large doses, but not at 1 cup. So cedar tea, and we've steamed with cedar, which is so wonderful. Pine and cedar, the essential oils are used for lungs. They're wonderful. Spruce. Now, I hadn't really heard about spruce, but according to Matthew Wood, it's antimicrobial. It's an old Ojibwe remedy. And drink the tea once again for opening the lungs, relaxing the lungs. And then, of course, for prevention, there's nothing like the bone broths if you consume animal protein. Chicken broth with garlic and ginger, saute some onions, and boil and simmer for several hours. And of course, it's wonderful if you can to include the medicinal mushrooms. You can get fresh shiitakes from the supermarket. But of course, if you have, maitake and reishi, and throw in, of course, astragalus, if you can, this is before while you're still healthy. And I always like to add ho shou wu in there, faux tea, Tommy was mentioning, which really is helpful for strengthening people who tend to be deficient, as well as being an adaptogen. Those kinds of broths are invaluable, but if you're a vegetarian, make a vegetarian broth and throw in some of these same herbs. And you can do that with mushrooms too. And drink, I'd say at least 2 cups a day. Now, to nourish and support every system in the body, consider nettle tea and nettle soup. Nettle has to be out right now. It's one of our earliest herbs, and I personally think that nettle is at its strongest when it's very young. I really find there's a big difference, or not a big difference, there's a difference between the power of young nettle and nettle after it's, kind of grown a little bit. And we try to harvest nettle when it's, 12 inches and under, or maybe a little bit more, but not when it's grown quite a bit higher. There's no plant that nourishes every cell in our body, every organ in our body, that's adaptogenic, like nettle, strengthens the kidneys, strengthens the liver, strengthens the thyroid, on and on. One could spend days talking about nettle. So as a preventive, absolutely, or even if you have it, great. I just realized we're at 4:57, and I've been going on, but just very briefly, I'd like to ask if there are any questions about this so far. Oh, there's a question from Katie Wilson. How is chokecherry used? Is it the inner bark that's used? And I believe it is the inner bark. Do you want to say anything more about it? I don't use chokecherry very much.
Yeah, it's the bark. It's the inner bark, but it's really hard to get just the inner bark when you're harvesting it. So, but it's the bark, not the berries. And you want to do the young shoots off of that and strip the bark. That's the easiest way to do it. You don't want to get the real thick old big branches. You use the young shoots to get the bark.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, take a deep breath. Been a lot of material. Tomorrow we're going to continue with the coronavirus a bit, and we'll be talking about the microbiome. And very importantly, I wanted to mention this earlier, if Patrick is able to come, we'll have a this will be very exciting. He's going to demonstrate the pathway of the vagus nerve, which is really important because the vagus nerve is the basically highway of communication between the brain and all the organs of the body, really. And once again, for immunity, we need communication in our bodies. So it's and that will also relate to a talk that I'll be giving on digestion and the microbiome. And if there's time, I'll also talk about heart consciousness and the Shen, and also the vagus nerve. So that's what we're doing tomorrow. And I want to wish you all, peace, equanimity in these somewhat crazed times, and assimilate, digest well, digest your food, and just remember that this is a lot of information. Everyone digests at their own tempo. So just digest as you find it comfortable for each of you to do. So, okay, and we'll be ready tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline and Tommy.
Thank you so much,
Please be
everyone.
online tomorrow by 10 of. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, come early. Yes, 10 of, come early.
Okay.
Yeah. Blessings. Have a great night.
Blessings.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary Beth.
Hi, Holly.
Hey. Hey, Holly.
Hi, how are you?
Hi,
Hi,
Linda.
Holly. Hi, Linda.
It's great. Say hello.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Good night.
All right. Take care, guys. Madeline, good job.
Good job, Tommy. Fabulous.
All right. I'm gonna all but Madeline and Maria. So Madeline, I'll upload these recordings to Dropbox and send them. I have everybody's emails. Do you want me to just send them out to the group?
Yes.
Okay. I'll Dropbox it to you as well. You're on this.
Great. Yes.
I'll use the same group.
And of course, Linda.
Yeah. Everybody.
Everybody. Yeah.
Ian, can you tell me how to turn it off?
Hi, Maria.
You just gotta close. Just click on the red. Click on the close your screen and it'll go away.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's
No
okay.
problem.
Hi, Maria.
Hello, how